Yeah, we're good. All right, we're
Cool.
up and running. So, hello to anybody watching this stream later on, because I assume no one's watching immediately, because you'd be a nerd if you did that.
Wait, I'm gonna tweet about this. Go on.
We're gonna tweet. All right, we'll do a little tweet. So while he's doing that, we are Nearmint. So I'm Mandy, or I'm Alana. Very flustered.
Are you sure?
I'm not sure. My name's Alana.
I'm Mandy.
Mandy. Oh, sorry.
That's Mandy.
Yeah.
That's Tommy. No. Alana, Mandy, and Tommy make up Nearmint, and right now we have Sam Humphries with us.
Hey! Are you sure I'm not Mandy?
No.
I think I really might be Mandy. It might be Mandy. Yeah.
Honestly, I think you'd be a great Mandy.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you. Well, I have great inspiration.
We can all be.
There's one Mandy who blazed the trail, and she set the bar so high for being Mandy.
I just wish I was Mandy.
You okay, Mandy?
Anyways,
Sorry,
okay.
I'm trying to give things to Adam. Sorry. Everything.
Obviously, this is our first stream. And we have some people viewing now. So, yeah, so we're the Nearmint
This is
team.
historic. This is the first one ever. I can't believe I get to be here with you guys.
Yeah, we're so lucky to have you. My headphones aren't even working. Oh my God, it's a mess. Sweet. So, yeah, historic book club joined by Sam Humphries. And we are talking about a manga this week that Sam picked out.
Yes, I did.
So it was called, I don't know how to say this, Tokyo Tarareba?
Tokyo Tarareba Girls.
And we read volume 1 of this, which we were able to get on Comixology through Kodansha, which is the publishing house. And so if you also read it, that's awesome. If not, we're going to talk about it. There'll probably be spoilers. So if it's something that you're interested in reading, come back to this video later. Maybe don't watch it live. But otherwise, we're gonna just be talking about like comics and life and stuff. It'll probably be about an hour-long stream. So if you're here to hang out with us, make sure to comment. I have comments up, and I can make them pop up on screen. So whether it's about the book or Sam and his work or Nearmint, whatever you want to talk about, we're here for you. So
I want some personal questions. Like, dig deep into the things you're worried about in my life. Get like borderline inappropriate. Let's do this.
Great, awesome. Yeah, we're not a PG by any means here. So.
Oh, can we swear?
Yeah. Fuck yeah.
Oh, fuck yeah. Fuck yeah. Everybody say fuck yeah. Fuck yeah.
Fuck yeah.
I'm not going to do it to keep a balance going.
Oh.
That's going to be my character in this.
Always the rebel.
You guys can't control
You're like the Wahlberg in the New Kids on the Block.
I'm going to go on and be in Transformers and what's happening. Probably other things. I'm also going to volunteer my iPad if we need to show a page. I think I can.
Oh, awesome.
Oh, look
That
at
work?
Yeah.
I have mine ready too. JIC.
I have the phone open, but cool. So, I guess quick synopsis of this book is that it is a kind of slice of life manga about a woman. She's a part of a group of friends, but she's 33. She's early 30s, and she is what they kind of start calling her a what-if woman, which is literally, I guess, what the Tarareba means. It sounds...
Tarareba, yes.
Tarareba, oh my gosh. Obviously don't speak Japanese, but manga is quite awesome because they almost always have cultural footnotes. So this one in particular, I got to read at the very end as well as throughout, that often it would say, what if, and basically that's where the name came from. But basically she is this 30-year-old woman that thinks a lot about her love life in particular as like a what if. So like, what if she had kept dating that guy she kind of felt meh about, or like, what if she had said yes instead of no? So it's her kind of just like coming to terms with the idea of if she continues to think like that, she'll never get what she wants, which at the beginning is romance, and then you start to see that she does it does branch out into other parts of her life, like her career. So I guess first thoughts from everyone, or Sam, why did you pick this book?
I picked this book because I love the creator. Akiko Higamashura is her name. She's done 2 other manga that has made it over to the West, like English translated. She did one called Princess Jellyfish, which is also made. Yeah, you know it. You know that one. That one's amazing. That's the first that I read by her. And then she also has one called Blank Canvas, which is a bit of an autobiography. It's about her time in art school and finding herself as an artist and being creative and all that kind of stuff. I love her work so much. I think she's fantastic, but I picked this one in particular because it seemed like a really comfortable or a comforting read right now. Like a lot of the Friends activity is around just going to like a cheap pub and getting wasted on beer. And like, I would kill somebody to go to a cheap pub with my friends and get wasted on beer right now. Like, that sounds fantastic. But also, like, as you were saying, like these women are in their early 30s and they're wrestling with questions of like, you know, what is their future and what does romance have to play, and have they wasted their lives, and are they wasting their lives, and all that kind of stuff. And I think a lot of, well, at least friends of mine who I've talked to, like, we're all feeling like our lives are on pause right now, and worried about like, are we wasting this time? Are we never going to get this time back? Are we always going to be like set back, or always be behind where we wanted to be, whether it's with career, romance, or anything like that? And I don't know if this book necessarily has any answers to it, at least not in volume 1. But I did find it comforting to see that the sort of things that we're wrestling with now in this crazy pandemic situation, they're just as relatable in a normal everyday setting, which means that this is something that we can deal with. Like, it's possible to deal with these emotions and these doubts and be okay. Just because it's a pandemic doesn't mean that we're trapped or it's impossible or we're screwed. So that's why I picked this one in particular, and also because it's a josei manga, and josei means women in Japanese. So it's similar to like shoujo manga means like girls manga, right? So josei manga is like the next step after shoujo manga, but it's very, very broad. Like if you read josei manga, you could be in your mid-40s, you could be in your late teens, you could be in your teens. And it's a booming genre, a booming sector over in Japan. Like, for example, probably the lowest circulation josei weekly magazine sells more weekly than the highest selling American comic book sells monthly. So it's a big deal over there, and it's a sector of manga that we don't get a lot of glimpses into over here in the West, because those are titles that don't often get translated and distributed over here. But this one has been, and I love it, and it won an Eisner last year, and I think it's just cool to see like the breadth of perspectives that they have in manga in Japan that we don't quite have all the time here in the West. So that's like 36 reasons why I picked this book, I guess.
No, that's great. Just wanted to add to that, if there's any viewers wondering about manga, which is Japanese comic books, it's what anime is based off of normally. We do have an article on Manga 101, including the types of genres of manga. So what he's describing, so what he's describing is the genre, and the genre in manga is based off of gender, or like typical gender, and age. So he's saying that this is the genre that this manga falls into is that, you know, over 18, over 20-year-old female typically. And so if you want to learn more about that, you totally can. But no, that's all really good points about just like their lives, how normalcy is and all that. So think that's great. Mandy, do you
Yes.
want to talk about your first impressions? Because I think this is your first manga you've ever read, right?
Yeah, aside from struggling to read Pokemon ones to Jackson, yeah.
Right.
Um,
Jackson is her 7-year-old.
yes. So because he loves, like, there's like Link one, like Zelda and Pokemon, and he loves every anime that's on that is kids able. But yes, I do. I have tried to read some to him, and I get very confused, which I'm sure doesn't help him. Obviously, because it reads differently. But Alana's article that she wrote helped me through it. But no, it was interesting. It's definitely a lot different than what I'm used to reading. Just in, like, it wasn't necessary to have a lot going on, where you do find that in, like, a comic. They're just every page or every issue, they're trying to, like, throw some big exciting event or, like, some sort of action scene or something into it. But this was just kind of more simple, like you said, like a slice of life kind of thing. So that was interesting. And I mean, being now that I'm in my 30s, it's also interesting to see, something that can, I mean, I've been in a long-term relationship for a while now, but it's still relatable, where it's like, yeah, like you said, Sam, I'm thinking about, like, checking off all the boxes for someone in their 30s now, right? Like, do I buy a house, or, what do I do with my job, and am I happy with what I've been doing, or, am I making those right steps? And you can kind of see that in the characters, which I enjoyed. So yeah, it was interesting for sure. I could see where, like, I think you were saying, Sam, it probably, like, takes off into, like, other aspects further on in the series, I'm sure, but, like, deeper into her love life or things like that. Because I mean, obviously, spoilers, there's the cliffhanger at the end, but
Yeah.
you're like, what?
What a cliffhanger.
I read that. I didn't finish the last, like, 30 pages until, like, 10 minutes before we started, and I just was like, wait, what?
Like,
We're all getting texts from Lana like, canceled. I have to go read volume 2. We'll do this another day. Yeah, I can't possibly, no.
Yeah.
Sweet. So what about Tommy? Did you have any thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, I enjoyed it quite a lot, while not necessarily relating to it, because it's not quite my story being told. I thought it was funny that it opened up with the 2020 Tokyo Games. That's kind of ironic for what's going on right now.
I had totally forgotten about that.
Yeah.
I did not realize that 2020 figured so heavily. I didn't remember that it figured so heavily into this book, but here we are.
Yeah, I immediately looked up, like, when this actually came out, because I wasn't sure if it was, like, new or not. So
Like
I was
6 years ago?
Yeah, it was shocking.
2014.
But no, I thought it was great. I'm not used to reading manga. I grew up with, like, Dragon Ball Z and whatnot, which is nowhere near this. It's not even fair to pretend like they're even in the same wheelhouse. That would just be kind of consolidating where you shouldn't. But I thought it was great. Like, this was, like, a whole new world that I was open up to, not just with the culture, but just with the way the story was being told. And I really appreciated that it was more of a slice of life, where it was just in her head so much, and the whole story was endearing. I'm looking at that right now, by the way, that's why I'm looking down. The whole story was endearing throughout, where sometimes some people struggle with, like, keeping the character likable while they're also just kind of complaining the whole time. But the whole time you're like, yeah, you complain, you earn this. Like, this is a weird thing going on. You're right. You talk to that sushi that's saying all that stuff to you. Yeah, that was great.
I think that's, like, a really good point, what you're saying, Tommy, about culturally, as well as, like, your experience with, like, anime, and then the sushi. So during the book, pretty early on, it's either she has a dream or she's drunk, or it's both. And then it continues on that these two pieces of sushi kind of talk to her, and they're the ones saying, like, what if, like, you ruined your life, what if, like, over and over. And so they're almost like her subconscious speaking to her. But the idea of that, and then at one point, a bombshell happens. Somebody in her life tells her something shocking. So she's, like, taken aback. And, in American, North American English speaking culture, even in something that's like stylized like a comic book, you'd see them make a shock face or maybe like go into a thought bubble. But because it's manga and because of how Japanese culture is with manga and anime, she like falls through the floor as though it's real. And so stuff like that, I think it's a really good like tipping your toes in the water for people like Mandy who have not read and not really experienced that kind of Japanese storytelling. You kind of got to experience a few of those, so like the sushi and her falling through the floor and like the, you know, the weird faces or phrases or like things that get overblown. That is very, if you are a Japanese content consumer, you're very familiar with it. But as a Western reader, you might not be. So I thought that that was well handled without being too much. And because maybe there wasn't as much going on because it was a slice of life, you had time to kind of process those pages. So I thought that was really good, just like thinking from a new reader perspective. I've read not quite a bit. I've read some manga in my life, so I'm not ever shocked by stuff like that. But if you start to think of it as a first-time reader, you almost have to learn those cultural cues. So yeah, I think you guys.
Yeah, I was really fascinated by those moments where like a character said something to her, and the lightning strikes, and the building starts to explode, and she's like falling. But the character she's talking to just continues to talk as if nothing is happening. That was super fascinating to me on a craft level because without having to change the scene, like she got across the exterior thing that was happening in terms of the conversation and the information that was being conveyed to the character and the reader. But at the same time, you got this visceral feeling about how the character was feeling inside. So it's like the exterior view and the interior view was happening like all at the same time. It was like very efficient. I was like felt like, you know, applauding as a comic book creator, be like, damn, good job, like way to handle that like in one scene instead of like 3 or 4 different scenes, which is probably what I would have to do. Or just have a character be like, I feel so sad about this, or I'm so shocked, but like there's nothing quite like showing a character like falling uncontrollably off the edge of a building to communicate shock and instead of just telling them shock. And I love those 2 little sushi characters. They're like cartoon versions of sushi that talk to her, which seems so silly, but I guess those characters became so popular that she made a spin-off manga of just those 2 characters. Very short, but they would give advice to questions that readers sent in Japan. So you could ask for advice for these 2 little cartoony sushi characters. And it is silly, but I think there's something very intentional about how they actually, I'm looking at my notes, they say what seems to be like the central thesis or the central dilemma of the characters when they say, what if women have to choose being loved over being in love once they're over 30? And that is like so heavy and such a crazy thing to consider. And it's so emotional and so relatable too. Like you don't have to be a woman in your 30s to like feel that. But when you have these like cartoon pieces of sushi saying it, you get like this weird juxtaposition. Yeah, there they are. You get this weird juxtaposition where you can process something so heavy without feel like you're being preached to or talked at, if that makes sense.
You need to find out if they're still taking questions.
Yeah, because it definitely would be weird if it was just like random other characters saying those things that they are saying. You know, like you wouldn't, it wouldn't come across the same way at all.
Well, I mean, manga in general has a different way of doing exposition, and sometimes it is way more on the nose. Like sometimes you open up a manga, you know, and you watch a movie or something, and there's like a narrator talking over it, and you're like, oh my God, here we go. Like now we're going to hear the story all real quick wrapped up, and then we're never going to hear from the narrator again. And like Japanese manga will do that, but it just feels different because of how they write scripts and how they pace things and kind of the weirdities they get away with. Like a lot of what they do is very weird. Like it's very
Yeah.
strange as a Western reader.
Mhm.
Because our TV shows and our books and our comic books don't use these things. So it's like a whole different form of storytelling.
It actually reminded me a lot of Scrubs. Anyone ever seen that
Yeah.
show?
Mhm.
Okay, yeah, I see
Where the
that.
main character says some crazy thing happened to reflect how they're feeling. That was every single time she did a thing, like when she fell to the floor. I think there was a scene where they were fighting in a
Yeah,
war. All that just brought me right back to there.
Yes,
totally.
with the guns and the bazookas.
Mhm.
I love that shit.
Well, and that's, I think, you know, and is it borrowing from that, like on purpose? Who knows? But it's funny because you can think of examples that do it well. Like, so it's almost like, should we do it more in American Western? I don't know. Then it would be overdone, you know?
I'm all for it, especially as a creator.
Yeah.
Of course, I write Harley Quinn where we can get away with a lot of that shit. And I don't know if I was consciously like imitating this book or the manga tradition specifically, but in my Harley Quinn run, we do a lot where we do cutaways to illustrate her emotional experience. And what we've been doing is we'll have one page of a comic book inside the comic book. So it's like you're reading an issue of Harley Quinn from the 70s, or you're reading an issue of Harley Quinn from Japan that's in manga style, or something like that. But it's really just like to illustrate what is going on inside Harley.
I mean, even with that, for people that have not read your run, they should. But if you haven't, if you've seen the new Harley Quinn movie, like the things we're talking about, they almost kind of do that. Like,
Yeah.
spoilers, but she blows up a building, and in her head it's like fireworks and confetti, and it's beautiful. And then they cut to like the emergency workers being there, and it's just a building on fire. So it's like it's almost the same thing of like unreliable narrators, because with manga, especially slice of life, and so this book, we only care about this central character. And that's to some advantages and that's to some flaws, because I do think that manga can be very flawed. Like there can be a lot of two-dimensional characters. So you even kind of see that with her friends, like they just kind of exist when she needs them and then they go away. But the thing is, it's kind of fine. Like if that's what it needs to be, if they're a narrator, like a device that's kind of different. But yeah, I don't know where I was going with that.
You brought up a really good point about the pacing, because in manga the scale is so much different than what we have in Western comics, specifically North American comics, where Tokyo Tarareba Girl is 9 volumes, beginning, middle, and end, and that is short for manga. Like that is an exceptionally short manga for a successful manga. Whereas, the Dial H for Hero, which I wrote, was 12 issues long, was originally only supposed to be 6 issues long.
Yeah.
So if you think about like a nine volumes and all the space they have to play around with tension and to really build up emotional moments, and to do crazy things like crazy asides, like where she's falling off the building, or they're in a situation they don't like, so you see them like picking up bazookas and going to war and stuff. They have a lot of real estate. The other thing is that these stories were published weekly originally in a weekly manga anthology. So these came out weekly, and the serialization was much, much more rapid. But what we had in this first volume, which was 100... Yeah, go ahead.
Is this one in particular, is the creator, the writer, and the artist? Because a lot of mangas is that case.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Most manga is that way, and she is the writer and artist, which I think lends. I think you get a lot more of those kind of like silent moments and poetic moments, especially visually poetic moments, because you don't have that drop in translation from a script to layouts and illustration. And also, if she's working on something and she's illustrating a face, she's like, oh my God, I didn't realize, but there's like a lot more emotion to mine here. She can say, fuck it, like right in that moment, it'll take less than a second for her to decide, well, I'm just going to do an extra page focusing on this moment. In North American comics, you could not do that. You could not just decide you're taking another page for nothing, because every issue you do has to be exactly 22 pages, not 21, not 23 or 20, whoever you're working for. Like, you have to hit that number on the dot. I forget where I was going with that. Oh, but yeah, the pacing is so much different. Like, in this one volume, the plot, it's almost the entire setup of the plot. And it's almost all the beats that you would want to see in the first issue of a Western comic. So, like, this is 170-something pages. Yeah, and it covers as much ground as you would typically want to have in a 22-page first issue of a comic over here. It's mind-boggling. I seethe with envy. My jealousy knows no bounds of basically having a first issue that's 170 pages long. But you get a different form with it. It's really interesting.
Yeah, it doesn't feel it's not rushed, but it doesn't feel like it has to be. Because like that's what I was saying. Like, I'm sure there's so many other aspects that come into the later volumes that, you know, feeds into her story and what she's going through. And like, even though, yeah, it doesn't feel like there was, aside from when you get to the end, there's no like giant event that really happens. She's just kind of like building her and what she's going through and how she's feeling, and kind of like you said, the kind of basis of her story, the plot. But, you know, it didn't need to rush it, and that was nice.
Yeah, I mean, Mandy even messaged me and kind of was like, is this normal? And I kind of had to like manga is weirdly paced. It's different because it chooses its time differently. And there are, again, advantages, and there are also so many mangas I've seen that have like sucked. You know, like the build-up is so good, but I mean, that's all media. But I find that manga either picks kind of, we're building the world or we're building the people for like the first, like in its entirety, 20%, like we're not doing anything else. And then it's like 80% plot. And of that, it's like 10% like exciting incidences. Whereas if you tried to pitch that for any kind of Western thing, people would be like, no, there has to be something in each one. And both are totally fine. I mean, even Mandy and I really love Jane the Virgin, and that's the telenovela, which is soap opera format. And that format is every single episode, every single issue has to have a cliffhanger. Like, and because of that, they have to top themselves every time. And because of that, they have to figure out a way to make everything make sense. And again, there's like Jane the Virgin, amazing, you know, and obviously soap operas are still existing and make lots of money. I don't know too much about them, but you know, I've seen comics and I've seen books that do the same thing of that. Like every single every single issue. And in a comic, like you were saying, that's 22 pages. So a volume would be like the first typically 5 issues. And even that is probably half or a third of what a manga is. Like, so that's, what's the math on that? Like 15 to 20 cliffhangers? Like, that doesn't work in the manga format. So it kind of becomes preference, but then it's kind of nice as like a reader to have all these options. Like, if you feel like you want something that is more like can't put down, there's this type of format. But then within each of these formats, there is so like with manga, this is a slice of life. This is not meant to be superhero. This is not meant to be anything like a counterpart to Western comics, you know, DC, Marvel. But I have read mangas, you know, the ones that get made into very successful TV shows, you know, Attack on Titan and Akira and all these things. Those are all like thriller actions. So there are more incidents of like exciting cliffhangers. So it's just cool to see the different formats, I guess.
Yeah. Well, two things about the manga industry in Japan. One is that they're built for much more longevity. Like we all have our favorite series that got canceled way too soon over here. Those usually last like 6 to 12 issues. In Japan, even like very underperforming manga will get much longer than that to try and build their audience, and also the business model is built on having a longer shelf of volumes and so on and so forth. So they know, the manga creators know, and their editors and the audience, they know going into it that they have so much more runway to get things going. The other thing is that in Japan, and you were alluding to this, Alana, is that they have a much stronger diversity of genre represented in the manga industry than we do in the comic industry over here. Mm-hmm. Whereas our comic industry does have a lot of diversity in genre. When you look at like Image Comics and Boom Studios and that kind of stuff, it's still predominantly superheroes. It's still predominantly Marvel and DC. Not that I'm complaining, I work for DC. But in Japan, they have all sorts of manga. They have slice of life manga like Tokyo Tarareba Girls. They have action sci-fi like Ghost in the Shell. Mm. And then they have stuff that like you would never even imagine would be an entire genre. Like they have a flourishing cooking genre in manga. Just like stories of chefs and cooking. There's an entire very popular, successful manga called The Drops of Jupiter that's all about wine and sommeliers. They have an entire subgenre of manga that's all about people who play mahjong competitively. So think about like Naruto and how those like competitions play out in manga and anime. That's with like mahjong and like, but they're like slamming down mahjong tiles on the table and stuff. So they the industry over there encompasses so much more, even more than we have probably in like Western television. You would not see a checkers TV show over here, even chess.
I mean, even Kodansha, who published this manga, is the largest book publisher in Japan. Period.
That's correct.
Like not
of any kind of publishing.
Novels,
yep.
Not. I don't think newspapers, like daily papers, like news is included, but every single print media in Japan, Kodansha is the most selling, which is
they're massive,
exclusively manga. So yeah, this is what people are.
And they're also the home of Akira, to name one. So like that's that's a pretty big tent that they have.
Card Captor.
Sakura.
I don't know. Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's just one of their publishing companies. You think about all of our publishing companies. So yeah. Cool. With that, I guess being said, do you, Sam, and kind of Tommy, like, because you've worked in publishing and editing, like, do you think that because manga is potentially like a smaller team and it's more like would you be able to talk about like the publishing and the business side of it? I guess, like, what is your perspective on that?
Yeah, a little bit. Actually, I used to work, I don't know if y'all know this, but I used to work for a manga company back in the day. Like way back in the day, I worked for the American arm of a Japanese manga publisher. We published manga here in America. This would have been 2002, 2003. So this was the summer where like 2001, like manga was like this popular in America. And then 2003 manga was like this popular in America. And in between was like Shonen Jump and the Shoujo explosion and Tokyo Pop and Viz blowing up and Dragon Ball Z on Toonami. Like it was it was like that summer. It was that summer. Yes, all that stuff. And that was also the period of time where Japanese manga publishers really turned their attention to America as a legit revenue driver. Whereas before they would just license their titles out. During that summer, they became more and more focused on controlling their own destiny in this market over here. And that
I feel like
created
with anime that happened, like Inuyasha, the movie finally came over, and all these things. Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. Before it was, what came over for manga and anime was really driven by a very specific subset of people. I'm talking about straight white dudes, if you didn't pick that up. Like extreme nerds. I mean, here too. But you had to be very nerdy to be into manga and anime before that, and these people were the founders of manga and anime as an industry in America. But they would, pick certain things, and even if you're really into manga and anime in America, you would have no idea that there was like relationship manga. You might think that it's all Robotech and Ghost in the Shell, two very excellent series, but not nearly everything that Japan has to offer, an entire art form. Anyway, so that was the same summer where the breadth of what was being published in America totally exploded. And also it was the summer where comic book publishers could no longer pretend that women did not like to read comics, because all of a sudden you had entire aisles and Borders and Barnes and Noble just chock full of women and girls just reading as many Tokyo Pop volumes as they could, and selling like gangbusters. So it was a crazy time. Viz totally transformed during that time. Tokyo Pop blew up during that time. I worked for a publisher called Gutsoon Entertainment. We did not flourish during that time. We did not. We were not winners during that time. Although we did sell some. Our slate was focused mainly on shonen manga from the 80s and early 90s, and that's not what was blowing up at the time. But I did get to go to Japan. I did get to work out of like a real manga office in Japan, and I learned a ton just by paying attention and also through osmosis. And I had already been like a manga fanatic already, so I was loving it. But the vast majority of manga is done by the same writer and artist. It is a little deceiving because comic creators in America will be like, no fucking way. There's absolutely no way one person does all those pages in 1 week. And they have a point, because most manga creators have assistants. And those assistants are the manga stars of tomorrow. So there's an entire industry that is successful enough to support having art assistants on a routine basis, which we don't have over here in America. We just don't. The industry is not lucrative enough to do that. But they do revere having a writer and the writer and artist being one person. They have a term for it. It's called mangaka. So instead of saying like the writer, you'd say the mangaka of Tokyo Tarareba Girls. And they do look at it not just, at this point it is now part of the business model, but they do look at it from a perspective of artistic integrity and purity of vision, that, you get the best work out of having a comic done by one person. Obviously, I disagree, but there are a lot of compelling comics that are done by one person. And I think that's a cultural thing that goes back to Osamu Tezuka, who created Astro Boy and Phoenix, and is the godfather of manga. He's the Walt Disney of Japan, and he was incredibly prolific as a writer and artist, and he did everything from manga for children like Astro Boy to very sophisticated adult manga, even like sexy manga. It worked all the time, and literally died at his desk in his like 50s or 60s or something crazy like that. So he's sort of like the touchstone. He's the OG of what manga means to Japan. It was really fascinating for me to go over there, because I got a real sense, and I think we're seeing more of this now that like celebrations for the Olympics are ramping up. I got a real sense, and not even just a sense, it was just literally said to me that they saw manga, anime, and video games as like the three cultural pillars of Japan, whereby they export a Japanese point of view and Japanese creativity and artistry to the rest of the world. And this is how, you know, we take over the world with our creativity. And you see that with like the videos and announcements that they set for the Olympics. Like, do you guys remember seeing the video for the Olympics of the Prime Minister of Japan dressed like Mario?
Mm-hmm.
It's playful and it's fun and they love to have fun with it. But like, could you imagine any politician in America, not even like this president, like leave him behind, but whatever, any American, even Canadian probably politician being like, oh, I'm gonna dress up as somebody like Mario for like a moment where the eyes of the world are on our country? Like, it's playful and it's fun, but it's serious for them. Like, that's like they really like embrace that.
No, I think that's a great point about we kind of keep touching on it, but the idea of the culture, like, you can translate a comic, you can translate a video game, you can translate whatever, but you can't really translate out the culture. There are some things they do to do that, but like, nothing, you can't just directly take it out. So then it's like there are us weebs or otakus or whatever term you want to use that like really want to go to Japan and we love it, and it's not because we know anything about the country really. I mean, some of us do, but like, I just like love what I've seen in media, and what I've seen in media is because of anime and manga, little bit of J-pop, and like one J-drama. Like, that's it, you know? So I'm sitting there being like, I want to go to the like people that make sake with their mouths, like in Your Name, you know, like that's where my head's at, right? So
with their mouths?
What?
Yeah, have you guys not seen Your Name?
We still gonna do this?
Your Name is so good. It is.
I've not seen it. I hear it's amazing.
It is so good. Again, as like a non-Japanese lover or like a Western viewer, you're gonna love it. It's very definitely set in Japan. So the main character, one of the things she does is that she's like in this forest town. You basically, it's not like a geisha, but like think geisha, like you go through training. And so she and her sisters have been trained through generations to be this like temple goddess thing. And basically, like, how you make sake is it's like yeast, you know, it's an alcohol. And part of the thing is that they like swirl it in their mouth and then spit it out. And then like 10 years later, it's fermented. They like bury it underground and it's fermented. It is a 30-second part of this movie. It's not like a plot line. It's just like fascinating. And like you Google it, and this is a real thing. And so it's like blessed alcohol, but you can buy it as a consumer. But they're like, it's like $10,000. It's crazy, but the movie itself is amazing. That's just like such a small part of it. But you know, and she's in her temple, you know, kimono and with her sister, and they have a whole procedure. It's the whole idea, like, you know, tea ceremonies and going to all the cat cafes and whatever. Like, it's just kind of another bit of Japanese culture that I would love to go see, because it would almost be culture shock. Like, we don't have any kind of things like that. So when you watch an anime or you read one of these books, it kind of, and I think that you have to kind of credit things like Studio Ghibli, of course, like Kiki's Delivery Service, Princess Mononoke, Spirited Away. A lot of those movies, if you've seen them, they are super Americanized. They're not direct translations. If you pull up the script, it's not one for one. They've completely redone the script, but they keep all these beautiful elements of like Japanese folklore. So I think for sure, media, art in general is how you show people your heart, and part of your heart is your culture, right?
Yeah, and I think it goes beyond like specific things like people who make sake or something like that, but goes back to what we were saying about like the pacing. And you read manga and anime and you're like, God, there's something so different about this, and not necessarily something that you can point to on the page, but it just feels different, and you sense that like this was made by people who have different values in what makes a comic good. And it's not that one set of values are right and the others are wrong, but it's fascinating to see what a whole other country has done with comic books. And you're like, boy, if they have done this, comic books are an American art form, and like rock and roll, it went overseas and came back completely transformed. And if they did that to comic books and manga, like what is the rest of their culture like? I mean, food is an obvious one. We all know a lot about Japanese food, but what must it just be like to be on the streets there, to walk there, to have a drink at a bar there? Like some of it is very similar and some of it is very different, and they're very in their own way. So I think like the culture is something that you can pick up in intangible ways from the media as well.
Yeah. Sorry to keep talking. If you guys want to jump in, let me know. But I feel like you feel like that a lot with this book in particular as well, is like a lot of her struggles like internally about being this like what if lady, and that she's 33 and she's unmarried and she, et cetera. And she's starting to feel like, is it too late, or am I a failure? All these things. I think that that's just like a human feeling. So it almost starts to feel, it's very Japanese. You're reading a manga. That this person has lived probably one of the most different lives you could possibly live. And yet and I mean, I don't want to speak for other genders or whatever, but I feel like even men could relate to these feelings, like if not literally exactly what she's feeling. It's just that human element of like, do I deserve to be loved, and did I make mistakes that I regret, or did I make mistakes that I learned from? Like, where's the line? So while still feeling so different, because it's manga and it's different and it's Japan, it also feels very familiar.
I find this book so relatable. Mm-hmm. I've never been a 30-year-old woman. I never will be. I'm not even 30 anymore. And I've never been Japanese, but I find this book so relatable, like on like a bone deep level. Like just that whole, like that quote I read before, like, is it a choice between being loved and being in love? And also just like the pressures that society places upon you, and not things that like people are putting a gun to your head, but just messages that you absorb, or things that you pick up and people say, where you register like either implicit or explicit disapproval in your life. And what does that mean? Should you internalize that? Should you own that? Should you take that into consideration at all? I find that to be extremely relatable. I also find it very relatable to have something happen to me and for me to text my friends 4 alarm and get in a fucking pub with them as fast as possible and kill some fucking pitchers of beer while we talk about what we've been through and what we're going through. So yeah, this is a very specific story. Like the specifics are there. This is not a broad or vague book, but I think this is a great example of how in specificity you can find relatability. You can find universality.
I think it, like you said at the beginning, especially right now with everything that we're going through in the world, whether you like your life's been flipped upside down and you've lost your job or whatever, or you're just kind of at home and have more time to think about it. I think a lot more people right now are just like, crap, like what is going on and what am I doing and what should I be doing? And will that change in a few months? And, like, what does that look like after? I think, yeah, it's extremely relatable now, if it wasn't already.
Yeah. And like, dating is interrupted. And I have friends who are like, I want to be married. I want to have kids, but, time is moving forward. Whereas, relationships and romance, or not necessarily relationships, but dating and romance is on pause. Have I lost a year just because of this?
People are like going on like Tinder Skype dates and stuff. I'm like, what is this? What is this? Yeah, I just met this guy and we're gonna have this Skype date. I'm like, oh, okay.
Like I have friends that have said to me that they're staying with someone that they maybe know they aren't right for, but would they rather be alone and have to go through all this thing, or be with someone that they don't feel these things, or it's not what they want? And so, I mean, that's even that kind of similar thing of like, would you rather be loved or be in love? Because do you have to choose? And I get,
do you have to choose? Yeah. Tommy, do we have to choose?
I think you should let the sushi decide for you.
Way to pass the buck, Tommy.
So let me consult them. Hang on a second.
I wanted to pull up what the alarms were because they kind of made me laugh. So it's the 4-alarm system. When we want to drink because there's nothing better to do, that's 1 alarm. I feel
that's 1 alarm. Yep.
That 1 alarm. When we want to complain about something that happened at work, that's a 2 alarm.
Mm-hmm.
When we want to really badmouth someone, that's a 3 alarm. And the 4 alarm is only needed when we need urgent advice about a man.
Right.
So those are the 4 alarms of this friend group. And then
so, Alana, if you had to pick one, would you primarily be the 1st alarm?
I would say I even had a therapist say I'm always at a 10. She's like, I don't know how you go any higher. Like, you're just always right there. So I would say I'm at least a 1 at all times. When Mandy and I get together, we definitely are a 3, and we're both
really? Well,
no, we are, especially Mandy, like the sweetest, nicest, genuine, thoughtful, like compassionate people. But when we get together, because we trust each other so deeply, it's like every bit of poison we've ever thought in our head just comes out. But then it's gone forever. You know, it's like into the universe, and like it doesn't have to materialize. But I've said that many times that Mandy and I are our meanest when we're together. But I think it's because we're so nice always.
It's nice to have a person where you can like fully be yourself, even like the mean, poisonous side of yourself, which we all have. It's nothing, doesn't make us evil. Tommy, which alarm are you?
I'm 4 alarm, but I'm lying about it. I just want to get my friends to hang out with me.
You just let your He needs to urgently talk about a man, but it's him.
Yeah, you're the man.
Yeah.
He's like, let's just talk about
this. Talk about it. He did message me. We do work together, and he did message me this morning. I slept through my alarm, so I missed the first 45 minutes of work. And I did wake up to a message saying, "Where are you? They were talking about me really nice, and like you're not here to hear it." Like on our work call. Okay.
So he wasn't concerned about the fact that you could get a demerit for sleeping in. He's like flexing on you.
Yeah.
It's good. She's doing what she wants, but she's missing out on the compliments. That's
I missed out. I'll have to ask them to repeat it on tomorrow's call.
Never know.
So,
jeez.
Sam, if someone read this book and they liked it, what other books would you recommend?
Good question.
Well, definitely Volume 2. Yeah. Like you gotta pick up on that cliffhanger. And like I said, this is a 9-volume book, so it's or a 9-volume manga, so it's a low investment as far as manga goes.
What is the cliffhanger?
I mean, you want me to like give you spoils? Like, no.
I wonder how long it lasts for into Volume 2.
I don't even believe it happened. I'm
okay. All right. There's only one way to find out. Only one way to find out. I would also recommend her other work. Blank Canvas is her autobiography, and it's great if you're an artist or a creative person of any kind. Princess Jellyfish is one of her other books. That's about a bunch of misfits, like literal nerds, but like not like I'm into like the Avengers, and that's cool because like they're nerdy about like the nerdiest things, but also just like friendship and romance and lots of twists and turns and cliffhangers. And beyond that, what would be a good one? The works of Rumiko Takahashi. She created Inuyasha, but also Maizani Koku and a bunch of other, like Ranma 1/2. She is in many ways the godmother of manga, and especially this kind of manga. Paradise Kiss is a very great. It's all about a bunch of fashion kids and fashion students. So it's got great style and amazing art and great costumes, but also very compelling relationship drama. Nana, this will be the last one that I recommend. Nana is about two very different girls in their early 20s, both of whom have first moved to Tokyo, and their roommates, and very, very different people trying to figure out their lives in the world.
Cool.
On that, what for our not manga but comic readers, are there things that you'd recommend Western comic wise?
Good question. I'm looking at my shelves over here.
Blackbird by Sam Humphries.
Blackbird, of course, by Sam Humphries. Also, Dial H for Hero and Harley Quinn, and I think I think Paper Girls, not an exact one-to-one translation here, but I think Paper Girls is very relevant here. There's definitely more like what we would call genre elements in Paper Girls, but that's a good one.
That's the Nearmint. It basically started as a Brian K. Vaughan fan club, so
yeah,
we're right there with you, buddy.
I support. It's tough to say because there are a lot of American comics with romance elements, of course. Like that's not anything strange to find. But are there a lot of American or Western comics that are relationship focused?
Yeah,
I'm blanking.
I think that you'd have to look at indie for sure. DC, Marvel, not always superhero, mostly superhero. When they're not, they're still very action or drama focused. So slice of life, you're going to want to go to indie. I think that there's a lot of web comics out there that if you read this, because again, the pacing is similar. When a web comic, it's the same thing. Typically, it's an artist is the writer. They also can normally publish at their own schedule. So there's that. I think I always
Check Please. That's a web comic that would be a very good comparison. Check Please. Have you heard of this?
Please, no.
Oh my God, it's so good. I almost chose it. It's so good. It started off as a web comic. It's about prep school hockey and gay romance, and it is so good. It's amazing.
All right.
So
next time you're on,
it's not check please and then like we're in a restaurant. It's check please and then like checking him into the boards.
And check please. I'm done. We're good. Definitely next time we could look into reading that for sure. So we've just got
I would be all about it.
Left here. So I guess I want to leave the readers or the watchers, I guess, with a thought that I had, which was, and we don't have to get into this on the stream because it's a pretty deep conversation, but like, I feel like you'd never see this with a different gender. Like, I feel like you'd never see a male comic like this. And I'd love to know people's thoughts on that. Like, is the feelings that she has, is these insecurities, is these things, the idea of what if I had said yes to these people, is that something that translates to other genders, or like specifically like a stereotypical masculine male? Because when I was reading it, I was like, I cannot imagine this flipped, because the jokes just wouldn't land the same. So if anyone would like to comment on that, and even better, if you have recommendations on anything that kind of feels like that, I'm going to allow all sexualities, but I do kind of think that gay men is cheating because there can be more play with that. So I'd love to see that if you guys want to comment below or tweet us. For Sam, like, where can we find you and what are you currently working on?
The second volume of Dial H for Hero. I just got it in the mail, which means it should be on sale in like 3 weeks or something like that. Oh, actually, who knows if anything is shipping or on sale? But soon. It will be out soon. And then
in the mail.
Yes, exactly. And then I'm writing Harley Quinn for DC. And I am on DC Daily, which is a television show on DC Universe, a streaming service. as you might have guessed from the title, is a daily news show with me and my friends. We host it. It is so much fun. We have a blast. It's actually also in front of the paywall. Sorry, my cat is so ornery right now. He thinks it's dinner time, but you're wrong. It's not. It's in front of the paywall. So if you go to dcuniverse.com, you can watch us on DC Daily every day without signing in or giving your credit card or anything like that. And then online, you can find me on Twitter and Instagram at Sam Humphries.
And I have that linked down below, so you can click it and for his stuff, him for his stuff. I have to get used to that. Sweet. Thanks so much for coming, Sam.
Oh my God! Thank you for having me. Thank you for having me on your inaugural book club. You will have other guests, but nobody else will be on the first.
No.
Number one. That's right. Right here.
You do a reboot. Or
it's very special.
You better not. And thank you for letting me pick the book. I really appreciate it. That was fun.
Yeah, no worries. We love recommendations because I think with anyone, you get stuck in your own vibe. So this is something I don't think any of us would have read. I probably will keep reading it. I don't know about the other two, but definitely a really good recommendation. Thank you so much.
Well, my pleasure. Thanks for giving it a shot. I appreciate it.
Sweet. Last thoughts, Tommy?
Always trust the sushi, and call your friends a lot.
Last thoughts, Andy?
Ditto to what Tommy said.
Last thoughts from me?
Yeah.
I don't have anything savvy, but Alana, I think your last thought was very interesting. That's a very, very good question.
Cool. So yeah, think on the gender reversal of this and let me know. Sweet. And yeah, my last thoughts are just thank you guys so much for joining, whether it was live or the pre-recorded. We do this every week, typically Wednesdays, kind of alternates depending on our guests, and we pick the book a couple weeks in advance. So follow us on social media as well as subscribe to our newsletter. That's our main source of information. So both on the book club as well as our recommendations, what's coming out this week, and we always write an article. We at Nearmint are very pro upping your level of nerdiness, especially when it comes to comics, manga, and this life. So if you are a casual reader or viewer, we want to give you some information so that you feel more comfortable. Or if you are deep in it, maybe we can teach you something you don't know, or we can have some really cool conversations. So if that's something you really like, make sure to subscribe to our newsletter. And like I said, our social media, so Nearmint is down below as well as Sam. And with that, I'm going to say goodbye to everyone. So everyone, bye, Sam. Thank you for coming.
Goodbye. Thank you for having me.
Bye, man.
Everybody stay safe.
Bye.
Yes, stay safe. Wear a mask.
Wear a mask.
Wash your hands.
Wash your hands.
Wash your mask.